I'm with Dom from Binari Property, Head of Research at Binari Property today. And Dom, just to get an idea on the Brisbane property market for the coming 12 months into 2026, and this is from an investor perspective, keeping in mind that within any market, whether it's the Australian market or the Brisbane market, there's markets within markets. There's housing markets within different areas and apartments markets. So there's hundreds of markets within the Brisbane market when you look at it, not just one market. But we're generalising here today and generalising in terms of investment. So the Brisbane market's had some solid returns in the last couple of years, probably missed the returns post-GFC, if you like, up until COVID. What's gone on in the market just over the last 12 months, and where do you see it heading for 2026?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as you mentioned, post-GFC, there was a 10-year period there. It was pretty stagnant. But then sort of from the period of sort of the pandemic onwards, it's been one of the top performing markets around the country. I think the average growth has been around 67%, which is one of the top three around the country over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So investors who have been in the market or owner-occupiers who have owned property in the market have seen their values increase quite dramatically, and that sort of continued through the last 12 months. It's been one of the top performers, I think, with growth of around sort of 8 or so percent across dwellings, house prices kind of thing. As you mentioned, there's markets within markets, so not everywhere has seen that same result, but it's been a pretty strong period. You know, Brisbane's last sort of 5 or 6 years have been characterised by very low vacancies, rising rents and increasing property prices, and that has all kind of continued over the last sort of 12 or so months and seems to be, I guess, still in a pretty strong position to continue over the next 12 months. There's not really anything there that will likely change the way it's trending, I suppose. Yeah, it's been a strong period for investors that have been in the Brisbane market, and I also think still some great potential for investors who are not yet in the Brisbane market but are thinking about getting into the Brisbane market. Right.
Yeah, I was reading the other day that vacancy rates are less than 1% in some areas of the Brisbane market.
Yeah.
And it's like other areas. I think would you agree that where the growth and the rental returns are occurring are in that inner ring or medium ring sort of suburbs, what I call probably 10 Ks?
Yeah, 10 to 20 Ks out from the city, I'd say, being your sort of more suburban areas. And the big difference between those areas and, say, your outer suburbs, and the outer suburbs have still seen some good growth, but probably the biggest difference between those outer areas and then your sort of inner to middle ring areas is you've just got less supply. You're more established, so there's more scarcity. You know, vacancy rates typically tend to be a bit lower. You're probably closer to public transport, closer to various employment hubs. So we're finding, and that's where a lot of our attention is focused when we're working with investors, those sort of middle ring areas where we think there's going to be sustained levels of growth and so forth. And I think when people are moving to places like Queensland, which has been a big part of what's driven Brisbane prices upwards, you've got to be kind of conscious of what are they going to be seeking. You know, one of the things they might be moving out of Sydney for is the lack of affordability of property within a reasonable distance of a city. So maintaining that sort of relative close proximity means that you're trying to help, we're kind of getting the properties that are likely to be desirable by the people who are likely coming into sort of Brisbane.
I suppose Brisbane has that affordability appeal, but also the lifestyle appeal that other areas might not have.
Yeah.
In terms of people migrating there from interstate. I think would I be right in saying a lot of the migration to Brisbane is also driven by work factors? There's a lot of infrastructure going on, and of course, how do you see the Olympic factor playing into it? Because we saw in the 90s the Olympics in 2000 in Sydney had a lot of infrastructure and housing and everything, and prices increased. We like to see that to continue. Do you think, given it's had a good run recently, do you think that's going to continue with the Olympics?
Yeah, I think so. I think the Olympics adds a lot, right? Like it adds commitment to certain levels of infrastructure, which creates jobs, which draws more and more people up to the market. Probably the biggest difference is historically when Brisbane's had really strong periods, as it has had in the last 5 or 6 years, Sydney's been quite subdued. So the gap between Brisbane and Sydney sort of disappears quite quickly. Brisbane goes on a strong run and Sydney's kind of more stagnant. The difference here is that we've gone through a few years here where almost the entire country has seen property values increase. So although Brisbane's been growing at a faster rate than Sydney, there still remains quite a wide gap between the two. So that affordability incentive is still there to draw Sydney-siders out of Sydney and up to Brisbane. And when you've got that significant infrastructure pipeline also there to create employment opportunities, it does make Brisbane an even more attractive place to be. You know, when you've got the affordability, the job market, the climate, all those types of things. And the city as a whole, I mean, in the lead up to a world event like an Olympic Games, cities tend to become a little bit cooler, a little bit more trendy. You know, Brisbane, through the travel we've been doing consistently for sort of 10 odd years, you can see the change in the quality of hotels, the quality of restaurants,
In
the
that
quality of
Newmarket
bars
area,
and
for
nightlife.
example, the South Bank area, etc. There's a lot more entertainment going on there, more
Correct.
bars and that sort of
Correct.
thing.
And it makes it
More
more
amenity.
it makes it a more attractive place for the younger population to move up there. You know, previously probably the only people moving interstate up to Queensland were the pre-retirees or retirees kind of thing. Whereas now you've got a lot of younger people who, you know, most people never holidayed in Brisbane. They holidayed in the Gold Coast or the Sunshine Coast. But now going up to holiday in Brisbane because it's got the best hotel in Australia, the Callao Hotel up there, which has drawn a lot of people to sort of check that out. And then off the back of that, you got the Howard Smith Wharves where they spent a lot of money putting, you know, entertainment restaurant precincts on the river there. So there's a lot of things that are happening outside of your normal infrastructure projects that make the city a lot more appealing.
Right. Okay. And then of course you've got that national dynamic of undersupply of housing and apartments. It's also evident in Brisbane.
Yeah. Look, there was a period of time where the apartment market was a bit more saturated in Brisbane. We're well away from that now. I mean, apartments are few and far between in terms of new releases in Brisbane, and property prices in the apartment space have also increased dramatically. It was a little bit of a lag behind, say, houses to begin with, but they've now well and truly sort of done similar to what the housing market has done. Like everything, there's areas you want to be more cautious of, but if you're buying in areas that have a lot of those attributes that owner-occupiers are looking for, and you're buying apartments of decent size that are very livable for downsizes and things like that, there's only going to be more and more demand for those types of properties as Brisbane becomes more of a world city and has more of that amenity in the city centre and city fringe that makes apartment living more attractive. So it's been really strong in the market. Brisbane as a city is very landlocked, so having coastline and national parks and mountains and things like that will mean that there's a lot of scarcity when it comes to our ability to bring on new supply, which will naturally help Brisbane's cause from a values perspective, probably not help from an affordability point of view, but help to see those investors, you know, reap good rewards from their investment.
So just to summarise, Brisbane market for 2026, due to those factors of supply, affordability and lifestyle, you see those sort of factors still being a good opportunity for investors, given there's that price disparity compared to the southern states. Yeah. But also the growth potential is still there, particularly with the Olympics factor.
Yeah, I think with the Olympics, the lack of supply, the lifestyle factors, the movement still being strong, the vacancy rate still being low, there's no reason why Brisbane won't continue to be quite strong in the next sort of 12 or so months. So we're very bullish on that market for investors.
Great. Well, Dom, thanks for your insights on the Brisbane market for 2026.
No worries.